You wake up every day inside a story that you believe is moving forward in a straight line. Yesterday leads to today. Today leads to tomorrow. You are taught that time is a road being built as you walk. But what if this has never been true? What if the road is already there in every direction and you are not building it? You are only choosing which part of it you step into. There is a future version of you that already exists in the invisible space around. A version that has moved through the fears that hold you back today. A version that made the choices you keep delaying. A version that lives with a quiet knowing instead of constant doubt. That future is not waiting to be created one day far away. It is already structured in the quantum field as a real possibility, complete and detailed. Already alive as potential. Right now, you might feel trapped in a loop. The same patterns, the same reactions, the same limits. You work on yourself, you visualize, you repeat affirmations, yet something feels heavy, slow, and resistant. You keep trying to push reality from the outside, as if the world were a wall standing in front of you. But in the quantum view, reality is not a wall. It is a mirror. It holds many reflections of you at once, and it keeps showing back the one that matches who you are being inside. Imagine that there are countless timelines running side by side. In one of them, you are still stuck exactly where you are now. In another, you have already walked through this moment and integrated its lesson. In another, you are living a life that today your mind calls impossible. All these versions exist as information in the same field. You do not create them from nothing. You tune into them like choosing a frequency on a radio. You have already felt glimpses of this. Those moments when you act differently without trying. When you make a brave choice that surprises you. When you say something wise and later think, where did that come from? For a brief second, you stepped into another version of yourself. The question is not whether your future self exists. The question is how often you are willing to enter that version and let it stay. In this journey, you are not here to learn how to force reality to obey you. You are here to remember that your future has already happened as potential and that your real power is to align with it. You will explore what time really is when you stop believing in the narrow story of past and future. You will see how the quantum field holds every possible path you can walk. And you will begin to feel deeply that the future you keep dreaming about is not begging to be created. It is quietly calling you to enter. As you listen, notice what is stirring inside you. Maybe a sense of recognition, maybe resistance, maybe a quiet voice that says, "This makes sense," even if you cannot explain why. That voice is the part of you that already knows. It is the echo of your future self, reaching back through the field, inviting you into a life that is not new, but remembered. As you move through this video, you will return to that feeling again and again. Like a quiet loop inside your heart, gently reminding you that you are already deeply connected to the future you seek. The illusion of linear time. You were taught to see time as a line that moves in only one direction. You are told that the past is behind you, the present is where you stand, and the future is somewhere ahead, waiting to be reached. But this picture is not accurate. It is only a mental model created to help you navigate a physical world that appears solid and predictable. When you look deeper, time does not behave like a line. It behaves like a landscape. Modern physics reveals that past, present, and future can coexist. They are not separate locations. They are different states within the same underlying field. Time is not a flow that carries you. It is a dimension in which all moments already exist as information. You are not moving through time. You are moving through experiences that are organized within the field in a way your mind interprets as temporal sequence. Imagine a book. All chapters already exist. You can open any page. You can jump to the end or return to the beginning. The story is complete, even if your eyes have only seen part of it. Your life works in a similar way. Every possible version of your story is already written in the quantum field as potential. You experience one version because your consciousness is focused on that specific chapter. When you understand this, something shifts inside you. You stop thinking of the future as distant. You stop believing that your goals are far away. Instead, you realize that the future you desire is a chapter that already exists. You have simply not stepped into it yet. And stepping into it does not happen by waiting. It happens by aligning your internal state with the version of you who is already living that chapter. Linear time is a useful illusion because it keeps your daily life organized. But the deeper truth is that you are connected to your future at every moment. The sensations you feel when you imagine a better life are not fantasies. They are signals. They are memories of a future that is calling you. When you sense clarity, peace, expansion, or certainty about something that has not happened yet, you are not imagining it. You are sensing a version of you that already exists. The moment you stop seeing the future as a distant destination, you open the door to step into it. You begin to understand that time does not separate you from your potential. Your state of consciousness does, the field of possibilities. The quantum field is not a mystical idea. It is the foundation of modern physics. It is the invisible space that contains every potential state of matter, energy, and information. You live inside this field every day, even if you never think about it. And this field contains something that changes everything about how you understand your life. It contains all of your possible futures. Every decision you could make, every version of your personality, every experience you could ever live already exists within the quantum field as a potential pattern. These patterns are not physical yet. They are not solid, not formed, not shaped into material events. They are like frequencies waiting for a receiver. They exist as possibilities that can become real when consciousness aligns with them. Your mind has been conditioned to believe that you create the future from scratch, as if the universe begins empty and you fill it with your actions. But this is not how reality works at a deeper level. The field already holds infinite outcomes. You do not create outcomes, you select them. You tune into the version of reality that matches your state of being. This is why two people can stand in the same situation and live completely different experiences. They are tuned to different possibilities within the same field. Think of reality as a vast ocean of frequencies. Each frequency represents a different timeline, a different identity, a different story. You are the tuner. Your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and sense of self act together as a signal. That signal determines which frequency you resonate with. When you resonate with a certain frequency, you begin to perceive the events and opportunities that belong to that timeline. You are not pulling those events toward you. You are moving your awareness into alignment with them. This is why your future already exists. Not as something fixed or predetermined, but as a menu of possible realities. You choose which one you experience by the way you show up internally. When you stay in fear, you tune into futures shaped by fear. When you rise into clarity, trust, presence, or gratitude, you tune into futures shaped by those states. The field responds not to your desires, but to your coherence. You already know this at some intuitive level. Every time you changed your mindset, your environment changed. Every time you healed an old belief, new opportunities appeared. Every time you let go of an old version of yourself, life reorganized itself around you. These shifts were not coincidences, they were alignments. The quantum field is not asking you to work harder. It is asking you to become aware of the fact that you are already connected to countless futures. You are not waiting for the right future to arrive. The right future is waiting for you to match it. Who you are determines which future you access. You are surrounded by infinite possibilities, yet you only experience one version of reality at a time. It may appear that the world is shaping you, but the truth is much more powerful. You are shaping which version of the world you step into by the person you are being internally. You do not access a future through effort. You access it through identity. Who you believe yourself to be and the emotional frequency that comes with that belief decides which timeline becomes visible to you. Your identity is not your personality, not your past, not your memories, and not your habits. These things are only expressions of deeper patterns. Your identity is the state of consciousness you hold most consistently. It is the emotional temperature you live in. It is the inner story that runs in the background of your mind. It is the expectation you carry about what life is allowed to become for you. And this inner state is what resonates with a specific future. Imagine that every future version of you is broadcasting a signal. The confident version broadcasts a signal. The healed version broadcasts a signal. The abundant version broadcasts a signal. The peaceful version broadcasts a signal. These signals are patterns of consciousness. They exist as states in the quantum field. You tune into one of these states by matching its emotional and mental frequency. When you change who you are being, even slightly, you shift the frequency you are tuned to. When you shift the frequency, you shift the timeline. This is why repeating affirmations without changing your internal state does not work. Words cannot override frequency. If you affirm a future of abundance while feeling fear or scarcity, you are tuned to the signal of the fearful version of you, not the abundant one. The quantum field responds to coherence, not repetition. It mirrors back who you are, not who you wish you were. You access a new future when your inner state aligns with the version of you already living it. This alignment does not come from forcing yourself into positivity. It comes from understanding the emotional signature of the identity you want to enter. Ask yourself who you are in the timeline you desire. How do you think? How do you breathe? How do you interpret challenges? How do you carry yourself? How do you make decisions? When you feel these qualities in your body, even for a few moments, you begin to tune into that version. You have experienced this before. There were moments when you suddenly felt more grounded, more confident, or more clear. And without effort, you made choices that reflected that identity. Those choices opened doors that previously seemed invisible. You did not create those opportunities. You accessed a version of yourself that could see them. The future you desire is not waiting for an external change. It is waiting for an internal match. When you hold the emotional frequency of your future self, even briefly, something begins to shift around you. Conversations change, ideas arise. Intuition strengthens, your perception adjusts. You start noticing pathways that were always there but hidden from the identity you used to inhabit. Who you are being determines what you perceive. What you perceive determines the decisions you make. And the decisions you make determine which version of the future becomes real for you. This is not a metaphor. It is how consciousness interacts with possibility. When your identity changes, your timeline changes. And once you understand this, the question is no longer how you will reach your future. The question becomes which identity you are willing to step into now. The future version of you that has already arrived. There is a version of you that has already crossed the distance you are trying to cross today. This version is not abstract or symbolic. It exists as a coherent pattern in the quantum field. It has already made the decisions you are afraid to make. It has already released the habits that keep you stuck. It has already embodied the strength, clarity, and emotional maturity you are reaching for. And although you cannot see this version with your eyes, you can feel it in moments when your inner world becomes still and open. This future version of you is not waiting somewhere far ahead in linear time. It is present in this moment as a potential state of consciousness. It is a blueprint of who you can become. Every time you feel a surge of inspiration, every time you sense a quiet confidence rising inside you, every time you get a sudden insight that feels wiser than your current self, you are touching the edge of this future identity. You are sensing the version of you that has already arrived. You often think of growth as a climb, a struggle, a long journey. But in the quantum view, growth is not movement from one point to another. It is alignment with a version of yourself that already exists. You do not evolve by dragging your current self to a better place. You evolve by stepping into the field of consciousness where your future self is already standing. You enter that version not by force, but by resonance. This is why you sometimes feel that you already know what you need to do, even before you do it. It is why you sometimes sense that a chapter of your life is ending long before the final moment arrives. Your future self sends signals back to you in the form of intuition, inner nudges, and sudden clarity. These signals are not random. They are pathways. They guide you toward the timeline where that version is real. To meet this future identity, you do not need to imagine every detail of your life. You only need to tune into the emotional and mental qualities of the version of you who has already overcome what you are facing now. Ask yourself how that version thinks, how that version feels, how that version handles uncertainty. You will notice that the answers come not from analysis but from a deeper knowing. That is because you are not inventing this version. You are remembering it. The future you desire already exists in potential form. And the version of you who lives that future is already reaching toward you, not through words, but through feeling, not through force, but through resonance. When you pause long enough to listen, you can sense that you are not walking toward your future. You are walking into the self that has already arrived, the noise that blocks your access. You are constantly receiving signals from your future self, but most of the time you cannot hear them because your inner world is filled with noise. This noise is not external. It is the emotional and mental interference that keeps you tuned to the timeline you are trying to leave. The future you want to enter has a clear and steady frequency. But the identity you currently inhabit has its own patterns, and those patterns create resistance. Fear is one form of noise. It convinces you that you must control every step, analyze every possibility, and prepare for every outcome. Fear collapses your awareness into the narrow timeline where nothing new can happen. Doubt is another form of noise. It tells you that you are not ready, not capable, or not deserving. Doubt keeps your attention locked onto the identity that has struggled, not the identity that has evolved. Anxiety is noise as well. It pulls you into imagined futures that match your current insecurities instead of the timeline that reflects your potential. Anxiety traps you in mental loops where you replay old stories and anticipate old outcomes. These loops are familiar, but they are not aligned with the version of you that has already moved beyond them. Attachment to old patterns is also noise. You carry emotional habits learned during moments when you felt small or powerless. These habits become automatic reactions that block access to new timelines. The more you replay these reactions, the more you stay tuned to the version of you that created them. There is also the noise of seeking control. You try to force outcomes, manage every detail, and predict what will happen. But the future you is not created through control. It is accessed through coherence. When you cling to control, you step out of the flow that would naturally guide you to the timeline you desire. This noise is not a flaw. It is simply the residue of the identity you have been living. But as long as it dominates your internal state, it interferes with the signal of your future self. You cannot step into a timeline you cannot hear. You cannot align with a version of yourself that feels distant or muted. When you begin to notice your internal noise without fighting it, something shifts. The noise loses its power. You create space for new signals to reach you. And in that space, you will sense the quiet, steady vibration of the future self that has already moved beyond the noise you are learning to release. The moment of the inner shift. There is a moment in your evolution when something inside you changes in a way that cannot be reversed. It does not arrive with noise or drama. It arrives quietly like a new awareness settling into place. This moment is the inner shift. It is the point where your identity begins to detach from the timeline you have been repeating and moves toward the timeline, where your future self already exists. You do not control this moment. You allow it. The inner shift begins as a subtle feeling. You start noticing that certain patterns no longer fit you. You respond differently to situations that once triggered you. You feel less interested in proving yourself and more interested in understanding what feels true. There is no announcement. There is only a soft sense of internal rearrangement, as if your consciousness is stepping closer to a version of you that feels more real than the one you have known. This shift is not about sudden motivation. It is not a burst of energy that fades after a few days. It is a deep recognition that the identity you have been living is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. You may not know what the next chapter looks like, but you can feel that you cannot go back to the chapter you have outgrown. This is the sign that your frequency is changing. During the inner shift, your reactions begin to slow down. You pause before falling into old patterns. You question thoughts that once felt automatic. You choose silence over urgency. You begin sensing which experiences resonate with your future self and which ones reinforce the identity you are leaving behind. This is how the shift grows, not through effort, but through awareness. You may also notice moments of disorientation. This is natural. As your internal frequency rises, the timeline you once inhabited loses its coherence. Habits, relationships, and beliefs that matched your old identity no longer make sense. You are not breaking down. You are stepping out of a field that can no longer hold you. The inner shift becomes complete when you start feeling a quiet certainty without evidence. You do not know how things will unfold, but you trust the pull toward your future self. You stop asking for signs because the feeling has become the sign. When this happens, the quantum field begins to reorganize itself around your new state. You have tuned into a different frequency, and the timeline aligned with that frequency begins to reveal itself. Entering the future that is already ready. Entering the future that is already ready for you is not an action you perform. It is a state you allow. The timeline you want to experience does not wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect version of you. It waits for coherence. Coherence happens when your thoughts, emotions, expectations, and inner posture all move in the same direction. When this alignment appears, even for a moment, you begin to step into the field of your future self. Stepping into this future begins with presence. You cannot access a new timeline from a state of internal chaos. When your mind is scattered, your awareness is locked into the identity that feels overwhelmed. Presence shifts you out of that identity. When you sit with yourself without judgment, you create space for a new frequency to emerge. This space is not emptiness. It is a doorway. It is the point where your current state and your future state begin to overlap. Entering your future requires a new relationship with emotion. The emotions of your future self are not the same emotions that shape your present identity. The future version of you carries emotional clarity. It carries a sense of grounded trust. It carries a calm awareness that does not depend on external reassurance. When you bring these emotional qualities into your current moment, You align your frequency with your future self. You tune into that timeline through feeling, not through imagination alone. The process becomes deeper when you shift your inner narrative. Your inner story is one of the strongest signals you send into the quantum field. If your story is rooted in limitation, the field mirrors limitation. If your story is shaped by growth and expansion, the field mirrors growth and expansion. The timeline you enter follows the narrative you live. When you begin telling a story that matches your future self, even silently, you invite the timeline where that story is real. A powerful step in entering your future is releasing the idea that change must be slow. Growth feels slow only when you measure it through the lens of your past. But the moment you shift your identity, the future becomes immediate. You are not creating the future from zero. You are stepping into a version of reality that already exists. When you understand this, you stop waiting for proof. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for the right moment. You begin embodying the qualities of your future now. Entering your future also means letting go of the emotional attachments that tie you to old timelines. Some patterns may feel comfortable because they are familiar, not because they are aligned. When you hold on to them, you stay tuned to the version of yourself that created them. Letting go is not about abandoning your life. It is about releasing the emotional weight that keeps you anchored to a version of your identity you no longer want to inhabit. As you embody your future self, you will notice subtle shifts. You speak differently. You think differently. You interpret events differently. You no longer react from old wounds. You respond from the clarity of who you are becoming. These shifts may seem small, but they are evidence that you are stepping into a new timeline. The quantum field responds to these internal adjustments. It reorganizes possibilities around you. New opportunities arise. Paths that were invisible become obvious. You feel guided toward choices that match your new frequency. The more consistently you embody your future self, the more stable your new timeline becomes. It stops feeling like a possibility and starts feeling like home. It does not require effort to stay there. It requires authenticity. You simply act as the person you truly are in that timeline, and reality adjusts around you. Eventually, you realize that entering your future is not a journey. It is a return. You are returning to the version of yourself that has always existed beyond your fears and limitations. You are returning to the identity that knows how to navigate life with trust and clarity. You are returning to the timeline that feels familiar because it was always meant for you. The reality begins to respond. When you begin to align with the frequency of your future self, something subtle but unmistakable starts to happen around you. Reality begins to respond. It does not respond because you forced it to. It responds because your internal state has shifted to a timeline where different possibilities become available. The external world adjusts itself to match the identity you are inhabiting. The first sign of this shift is a change in the way you perceive your environment. Problems that once felt heavy begin to lose their weight. Situations that once triggered you no longer have the same power. You feel a calm distance from the noise that used to shape your decisions. This change is not the result of external improvement. It is the reflection of your new internal alignment. As your inner frequency stabilizes, life begins to reorganize itself in ways that seem almost coordinated. You meet people who reflect the qualities of the timeline you are entering. You encounter opportunities that seem to appear at the perfect moment. Doors open without effort, and pathways that once felt blocked become clear. None of this is random. These changes are markers of a shift in the timeline you are tuned into. You may notice that your intuition becomes more accurate. You feel guided towards certain choices. You sense when something resonates and when something does not. This resonance is the signal of your future self aligning with your present awareness. The more you follow this resonance, the more reality rearranges itself around your new identity. Another sign is the appearance of familiar feelings within unfamiliar situations. You experience moments that feel strangely predestined, as if you have already lived them in another version of your life. These flashes of recognition are reminders that your future self has already walked this path. You are stepping into the emotional memory of a timeline that has always existed as potential. Reality also responds through the removal of what no longer aligns with your new frequency. Certain situations fade. Certain connections weaken. Certain habits dissolve. This release may feel uncomfortable at times, but it is a natural part of entering a higher timeline. The field does not keep what does not match your new identity. As these shifts unfold, you begin to understand that reality has always been responsive to your inner world. It has always mirrored your alignment. When you step into the frequency of your future self, the world reorganizes itself to reflect that version of you. What once felt distant begins to feel inevitable. Signs that you are already in the new future. When you enter a new timeline, you may not notice it at first. The shift is internal before it becomes external. But as your new identity stabilizes, certain signs begin to appear. These signs do not arrive as dramatic breakthroughs. They arrive as recognizable patterns that reveal you have stepped into the future you once imagined. Your mind may try to dismiss them, but your deeper awareness recognizes them immediately. The first sign is emotional alignment. You feel a steady sense of clarity that is not dependent on circumstances. Situations that once created confusion now feel simple. You no longer need to convince yourself that you are on the right path. You feel it quietly in your body. This emotional alignment is the signature of your future self. It confirms that your internal state has synchronized with a new timeline. Another sign is the presence of subtle synchronicities. These are not coincidences. They are reflections of your new frequency echoing back to you. You may think of someone and they contact you. You may look for a solution and the answer appears without effort. You may feel pulled toward a decision and discover that the path has already been prepared. These synchronicities show that your external world is now responding to an internal coherence. A third sign is the change in your default thoughts. You notice that the stories you used to repeat no longer feel true. Doubt loses its power. Fear loses its intensity. You begin making choices based on expansion instead of protection. Your inner dialogue becomes more aligned with possibility than limitation. This shift in thought patterns is one of the clearest indicators that you are inhabiting a new identity. A fourth sign is the emergence of new opportunities. They may be small or subtle at first, but they represent doors that only exist in the timeline you have entered. You begin to encounter people, ideas, and experiences that match the qualities of your future self. These opportunities are not random. They belong to the frequency you are tuned into. A final sign is the sense of inevitability. You feel as if you are walking towards something that has already been set in motion. You do not need to push. You do not need to chase. You feel guided. You feel supported. You feel that the future you desire is no longer a distant image. It has become the path beneath your feet. These signs do not arrive to prove anything. They arrive to remind you that you have entered a new timeline. And once you see them, you cannot return to who you were before. Remaining in the new timeline. Once you enter a new timeline, the most important task is learning how to remain there. A shift in frequency can be powerful, but it becomes permanent only when your inner state stabilizes. You do not stay in a new timeline through control or effort. You stay by consistently embodying the identity that led you into it. The new reality becomes natural when your thoughts, emotions, and choices stop reflecting the old self. Remaining in a new timeline begins with emotional awareness. The emotional state of your future self is different from the emotional state of your past self. When you notice old emotions pulling you back into familiar patterns, you do not fight them. You simply recognize that they belong to a timeline you have already outgrown. This recognition weakens their influence and strengthens your coherence with the new identity. Another key element is the way you respond to uncertainty. In old timelines, uncertainty triggered fear, doubt, or the need for control. In the new timeline, uncertainty becomes a sign of expansion. It signals that life is rearranging itself around your new frequency. When you approach uncertainty with openness instead of contraction, you deepen your alignment with the timeline you have chosen. You also remain in the new timeline by honoring new impulses. The future self you have stepped into sends guidance in the form of intuition and subtle inner directions. When you feel inspired to take a step, you follow it. When you sense that something no longer aligns, you release it. These small choices accumulate and anchor you in the new identity. Another important factor is the dissolution of old narratives. The stories you repeat about who you are and what is possible for you shape the reality you stay connected to. When an old story arises, you acknowledge it without believing it. You choose the narrative that matches your future self, even if your mind does not have evidence yet. The evidence appears only after the narrative becomes stable. Remaining in the new timeline also requires self-trust. This trust is not blind. It comes from the quiet knowing you feel when you align with your future self. You no longer ask if things will work. You focus on who you are becoming. When you trust your new identity, reality adjusts itself to match your trust. Over time, the new timeline becomes your default state. It no longer feels new, it feels like home. The old self loses its pull, and the future you once imagined becomes the person you naturally embody. As you reach this point in your journey, you may begin to sense something subtle yet powerful unfolding within you. It is the awareness that your future is not a destination waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. It is a living presence that has been connected to you long before you were aware of it. The version of you who has already grown, healed, expanded, and evolved has never been separate from you. It has always existed as a frequency within the quantum field, waiting for you to recognize it. Integration means allowing this truth to settle into your consciousness. It means realizing that the distance between who you are today and who you are becoming is much smaller than you imagined. This distance is not measured in years or achievements. It is measured in alignment. When your inner state shifts, the timeline shifts with it. The future becomes accessible not because you chase it, but because you open yourself to the version of you who already lives there. As you integrate this understanding, you begin to see your past differently. You recognize that every challenge, every delay, and every moment of uncertainty was preparing you to tune into a higher version of yourself. These experiences were not obstacles. They were lessons in frequency. They shaped your awareness so you could step into a timeline that holds greater clarity and purpose. You also begin to understand that the qualities you admire in your future self are not distant ideals. They are seeds already present within you. When you act from courage, you meet the version of you who is courageous. When you act from clarity, you meet the version of you who is clear. When you act from trust, you meet the version of you who no longer doubts the unfolding of life. These qualities grow stronger each time you choose them. Integration also means letting go of the urgency to control how your future unfolds. The future that is meant for you is already structured in the field. Your task is not to manipulate the path. Your task is to remain aligned with the identity that belongs to that path. When you do this, life unfolds in a way that feels guided, natural, and deeply familiar. As you continue walking forward, you will notice moments when you feel as if you are remembering rather than discovering. This feeling is the signal that you are aligning with the future that has always been yours. You are not stepping into something new. You are stepping into the version of yourself that has been waiting for you to arrive. If this message resonated with you, subscribe now to stay connected with the energy that awakens you. Like this video to anchor this frequency in your field. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a transmission that your spirit needs. And comment below, I am the frequency. Let the universe hear your voice. You're not here by chance. You're here to rise and remember who you truly are.